The Celtics won their Game 5 matchup against the Mavericks and were crowned the NBA champions for the franchise's 18th in NBA history, surpassing the Lakers for sole possession of the most championships by a given franchise. And it is, it's been a long time coming here during the Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum era, where it was all the way back in 2016. I mean, really, if you want to get technical, you can go back to 2013 or 12, I believe, was the year where the Celtics traded their big three of Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce to the Brooklyn Nets and ended up getting the picks necessary to draft Jaylen and Jayson. But, regardless, it's been a long time coming here, and the Celtics were able to do so in this Game 5, wire-to-wire, one of three, I believe it is, wire-to-wire victories to close out an NBA Finals in history. Felt like it could have been an even bigger score differential here, where the Celtics did hold a lead of at least 26 points, so by no means is this me being critical of them, because they were clearly the better team and they dominated all the way through. In the third quarter, they went a little cold on offense, and the Mavericks seemed like they were maybe working their way back into the game, but ultimately the Celtics just sort of cruised their way through this game, and as a whole through the playoffs and to some degree through the regular season. Again, this is, one of the all-time teams when you consider at least just some of the statistics. I'm not saying definitively yet that this is going to be viewed as an all-time team, but finished with the 5th highest net rating in NBA history. And again, we'll sort of dive into the idea of whether or not they are an all-timer later in the show, but this was just a very convincing game, as we've seen from the Celtics time and time again. They obviously got blown out in Game 4 in Dallas, which did maybe generate a little bit of doubt, but ultimately, the Celtics came home on 6/17, the 16-year anniversary of when they last won a championship in 2008. 617 also happens to be the Boston area code, so it feels like there was a little bit of magic in the air coming into this game. And it was interesting to see the way that the Celtics cut down their bench to just 7 players. It was their starting 5 plus Kristaps Porzingis, who was available in this game, who got some run time, and Sam Hauser, that is, who I thought was excellent in this game. Peyton Pritchard was pretty much cut out of the rotation due to the fact that Luka was time and time again attacking him on the defensive end, but he did come in for those 4 seconds right leading into halftime, where he hit the half-court shot, his second one of that kind in this series. And ultimately, as much as the Celtics have been this offensive identity team, it was another masterful defensive performance from the Celtics in this game, where they held the Mavericks to under 100 points in each of their 4 wins. And just the defensive growth under Joe Mazzulla. Obviously, Mazzulla, fair or not, during his first 2 years as the head coach of the Celtics, has had to deal with a lot of comparisons to Ime Udoka, who was the original plan for the Celtics post Brad Stevens, and he had taken the Celtics to a finals appearance in his first season, and in large part it was because he helped unlock that defense back in the day. That was when Marcus Smart won the Defensive Player of the Year award. I believe that Robert Williams would have won it if he didn't end up getting hurt towards the end of that year, but the defense was the backbone of that roster that made them a true finals contender. And obviously, Mazzulla's first season was very much so on the offensive side of the ball, Mazzulla ball, firing away from 3 and such, but at this team's core is defense, and that is something that Mazzulla sort of had to just adjust a little bit in terms of refocusing some of that energy on the defensive side of the floor. And you saw when the Celtics were playing their best offense, it was coming off of transition opportunities because of excellent defense on the other end. So from that perspective, definitely have to give credit to Joe Mazzulla, youngest coach in the NBA, and has now led his team to a championship. But as much as we want to credit the coaches, and Mazzulla does deserve credit, it is the NBA, and it is about star power at the end of the day. And this was a very much needed game from Jayson Tatum, where this isn't going to go down as his best series of his career, but it was still another incredible closeout performance. We've seen this throughout his career in a number of instances in this game, and we've seen it for the past couple years, where last season it was the series against the Philadelphia 76ers, where he basically pulled his legacy out of the gutter after having an abysmal first three quarters, came alive in the fourth quarter and led the Celtics to an overtime victory in Game 6 on the road facing elimination, only for him to then top that performance by dropping 51 points in Game 7. A little bit of a similar situation in 2022, where the Celtics were on the road in Milwaukee against what was at that point seen as the better team, the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks, granted without Chris Middleton, just for context there. But Jayson Tatum ended up scoring, it was 46 points, I believe, on the road in that game, 17 of 23 from the field. And this was just another incredible Jayson Tatum putting a stamp on the series. 31 points, 11 assists, 8 rebounds, and 2 steals in this game. Still struggled from the three-point line. That's definitely an area where I feel like Tatum, just the consistency of the three-point shot, is probably going to be one of the top priorities for him. We've seen him be able to let it rip from deep in the past, and this year, again, it's not the lack of taking the shots, but making them more so, and that's an area where I do feel like he can absolutely improve at. But during this game, he passed Kobe Bryant for the most postseason points by a player aged 27 or younger, which is an incredible feat there. He also became one of 6 players in NBA history to lead a championship team in points, rebounds, and assists. He joins Larry Bird, Hakeem Olajuwon, Tim Duncan, LeBron James, and Nikola Jokic. So some historic feats there for Jayson Tatum, where he is going to face some level of backlash after this series because his efficiency was not good. He shot 39% from the field, 26% from 3. And again, that efficiency, I think, is the number one thing that if you feel like Jayson Tatum is already at his peak, I would push back a little bit. He is 26 years old now. Ultimately, is he going to add this other skill to his game? Probably not. But at the same time, again, the shot selection can absolutely improve. And again, just the efficiency, I'd say specifically around the rim and from the three-point line. He used to have that mid-range game. Maybe he tries to bring it back. Ultimately, I don't know if anybody in the Celtics front office is going to push him to bring back the mid-range, considering the analytics of the NBA today. But being a more powerful finisher at the rim, and again, trying to find that consistency with his three-point shot. But he was, at least in this game, the best player on the court, and it was curious to me whether or not it was going to ultimately be enough for him to overtake Jaylen Brown as the finals MVP. Jaylen entered the night as the favorite, and I thought that I saw during the game that the odds had actually shifted in favor of Tatum, but ultimately the voters decided to go with the series as a whole, and Jaylen Brown, who had a good, not great game, I would say, in Game 5, scored 21 points. Another area where his playmaking has actually very much improved over the years as well. But for Jaylen, even if he wasn't the most efficient from the game, he was 7 of 23 from the field, but the big impact that he has is on that defensive side of the floor now, and it is why Tatum and Brown have become so complementary of one another, is because they are willing to sort of adapt their game into different areas to make them more compatible and less redundant. And Brown in this game, you could see the fact that he was during these mic'd up moments was trying to overtake, or trying to take on Luka Doncic, was talking to the coaches about match my minutes with him, and the fact that once Luka gives up the ball on a possession, I'm not going to let him get it back. All of those things, you can see the intensity that he plays with on the defensive side of the floor, and ultimately Brown becomes the finals MVP. And again, we'll dive a little bit more into the combination of Tatum and Brown in the next segment here, but it does just go to show that this is a tandem more than anything else. It's not one individual face of the Celtics, but this group together is very well possibly the best in basketball. But ultimately, this is a little bit of a disappointing end for the Mavericks, especially the fact that you saw their star players, for whatever reason, felt a lot of scrutiny throughout the series. Luka Doncic had his moment, specifically after Game 3, where the entire world was at his neck, I would say unfairly. Now, I talked about him on my show the next day and about how he does need to be better, but it doesn't automatically knock him from being a top 4 player down. It's just there are areas he needs to improve, and it would have been helpful if anybody else on this Mavericks team would have stepped up, specifically looking at Kyrie Irving, who really struggled in Boston. He admitted the fact that he let the Boston crowd get to his head a little bit in these 3 games. 14.3 points per game on 34% from the field, 18% from 3. So again, it is not fully back to the drawing board for the Mavericks, but they are going to have to make some adjustments. But we'll dive more into that at the end of the show. For now, we are going to be moving on to this conversation around Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum. The argument a little bit in terms of the finals MVP, but more so just talking about the development of these two players being able to work with one another. So we're going to be diving into all of that. But first, we are going to be taking a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.